Welcome to today's briefing, TFRs and how to avoid them. I'm Major Joshua Boudreaux, and I've flown all different types of aircraft from small 152s, 172s, gliders, to military jets, T-37s, T-38s, the F-16s, even in the Thunderbirds. And I'm here today to tell you about TFRs, why they exist, and most importantly, how to avoid them. Let me set the stage for you. When a good day goes bad, you walk outside, it's beautiful. The weather's great, you've got one of your friends and you want to go take that elusive trip to find that $100 hamburger in the next city. So you pre-flight the aircraft, you hop on in, you go blasting off, and you're on your way. When all of a sudden, this happens. Let's pull some learning points from that and how to avoid that from happening in the future. Obviously, the pilot in this situation didn't check the TFRs via the NOTAMs and didn't know there was an active presidential TFR around his location. He got scrambled on and ultimately intercepted by a NORAD fighter armed with live air-to-air missiles and gun, ready to respond to any nefarious actor that means us harm. All right, let's back up and let's talk about NORAD's mission. We're a binational command staffed by both U.S. and Canadian forces out in Colorado Springs, stationed at Peterson Air Force Base. And our job is to protect North America. Now, we've done that throughout the past ever since 1950s. And today, in the post-9/11 era, our focus has changed. What most people know us for is, you guessed it, tracking Santa. And while we love doing that, a good day for Santa can go bad if he doesn't check the NOTAMs and follow the procedures. NORAD's mission pre-9/11 was to respond to any unauthorized entry into the US or Canada. We do that by positioning radar sites and alert fighter aircraft around the United States. And pre-9/11, our focus was always outward, looking for any type of Russian bombers coming over the poles or submarines arising from the Atlantic and Pacific. There are three missions at NORAD: aerospace warning, aerospace control, and maritime warning. Today we're going to speak specifically to aerospace control. After 9/11, the world changed forever. No longer were we looking outward. Now we had to look inward for any type of adversaries that meant us harm via aviation or any type of asset delivered from the air. We currently have F-16s, F-15s, F-22s, and CF-18s placed strategically all around the US, Canada, and Alaska to ensure safety for both the aviation population as well as everyone that's on the ground. In order to conduct our mission, we're constantly monitoring and surveillancing the airspace 24/7, looking for nefarious actors. Why do you care? Well, you, like I, are taxpayers, and your tax dollars are going to making sure that we protect the United States and Canada. Also, you probably want to make sure that everyone at home, your loved ones, are safe. Also, if you're one of those unfortunate aircraft to get intercepted, then your good day can go bad very quickly. What does this mean? It could be anything from license suspension, revocation, fines, or additional training. And we want to, by this briefing today, prevent that from occurring in the future. Now, an NORAD aircraft can intercept you at any point where we deem that there may be a threat to people on the ground or national security. As I said before, we have fighters stationed all across the US and Canada capable of responding in a moment's notice. Additionally, we sometimes have fighters airborne at any given time during presidential support as well as national security events, such as the Super Bowl. Who does NORAD intercept? 90% of the time, we're intercepting general aviation aircraft. And I'm telling you folks, it's not going to get better. All of the restrictions continue to get piled on as technology continues to evolve. So there's really no excuse for people not to follow the rules. Unfortunately, it still happens. In today's briefing, we're going to continue to focus on how to plan and how to fly talking and squawking to avoid intercepts. Now, as you know, TFRs are designed for several different areas, one of which is the presidential TFR, which we will discuss in more detail. Other events would be rocket launches, space launches, fires, And when we and the FAA work together to put up those TFRs, we're trying to protect people and ultimately save lives and property. I'll give you an example of the mobile air firefighting, which also takes place out here in Colorado Springs. If there's a fire that pops up and C-130s are dispatched to expel retardant or drop smoke jumpers, and someone decides to fly through a TFR, everything has to stop to ensure the safety of the people on the ground as well as in the air. And that delays our progress and eventually will spread the fire. So these are other reasons that don't have to do with presidential escorts where TFRs are important. And they can pop up at any time. With a presidential TFR, typically 24 to 48 hours prior to a visit, we will certainly alert via the NOTAM system. It's also going to pop up on your iPads if you have an electronic flight device. However, like I said, if there's a fire TFR or a rocket launch TFR or some other reason to have that flight restriction, that may be almost in a no-notice situation. And with today's increased technology, ADS-B, being able to just call on a cell phone or check with air traffic control, there shouldn't be an excuse why we would penetrate a TFR in general aviation. So let's break down the presidential TFR. As I said, the outer ring is 30 nautical miles with an inner ring of 10 nautical miles. We'll put that up anytime the president travels outside of Washington, D.C. When he's inside Washington, D.C., we'll talk more about what a CFRA and freeze are. If you remember nothing from today's briefing, except for 3 words, remember plan, talk, and squawk. If you properly pre-flight plan every single flight that you go on, then you could check the NOTAMs and know that a TFR exists. If you talk to ATC, they can certainly advise you of any TFRs that have popped up last minute. And if you're squawking a discrete code, then we know you're not one of those nefarious actors, and we can quickly get information relating to your profile. How to avoid being intercepted. Pre-flight planning is essential. There are several websites which we will go through, as well as electronic media that is either on board the aircraft or is complementary to the aircraft, i.e. an iPad. If you pre-flight plan, or if you are airborne and able to get updated information, you should be able to get all the information concerning a TFR in your location. The previous slide talked about 1-800-WEATHER BRIEF, which almost everyone uses nowadays if they're going to file a flight plan. There's also the websites for tfr.faa.gov that you can go to, as well as ForeFlight and Garmin, WingX Pro, and all the off-the-shelf commercial software currently being provided. When you go to the FAA's TFR website, there's going to be several different options to click from. You'll see both written TFR descriptions as well as graphical depictions of those TFRs. On the website, you're also going to see that when you click on the geographic and the visual TFR, it's going to give you a lot of information that you can understand when the TFR is active, what the reasoning for, and who is authorized to go into that area. If you have a phone handy, then 1-800-WEATHER BRIEF and flight service stations should be able to give you all the information concerning TFRs in your area. If you're up to date with technology and you want to avoid being intercepted, electronic flight books are a great tool. Just make sure that you're updating your electronic flight book or you have some type of TSB or ADS-B way of getting information that is up to date on that device. Okay, so the TFR exists and you want to go through it because you want to save fuel and ultimately money. Well, just because there's a 30-mile TFR up doesn't mean that you can't go through it and you have to go around it. So if you would like to go through that 30 nautical miles, you need to be on a discrete frequency, so squawking. You need to be talking to air traffic control, and you need to be on a flight plan, whether VFR or IFR. If you're going to land in an airfield that's inside that 30 miles but outside the 10, you can certainly do that. You just have to abide by those procedures. If you are going to squawk 1200, not talk to anyone, and not be on a flight plan, then you cannot enter that 30 nautical mile bail. The 10 nautical miles is more restrictive. The majority of times, only carriers, i.e. United, American, Delta, flag carriers operating under that part of the CFRs can enter into the 10 nautical mile bail. And there's several other procedures that have to go on before they're allowed to do that. Typically, if the president is in the area, there's going to be fighters airborne already inside that TFR. So it will be a very quick response and very self-critiquing if you do not follow these procedures. Obviously, if you don't want to follow any of those procedures, then you can simply just avoid the TFR. But be aware that you should give yourself about a 3 to 5 nautical mile buffer, because your violation ultimately is going to be dependent on the FAA air traffic control radars and not your GPS. Several times I've seen in the past, especially during the recent Super Bowl, where aircraft would fly all the way up to the 30 miles, maybe 30.4, and then they'd turn 90 degrees to avoid the TFR. That gets us really excited and antsy, especially if a lot of people are doing that, because we're assessing that people are trying to assess our capability to detect them. And it gets everyone on high alert. So I would say, again, if you're going to avoid it, but give yourself a buffer. Otherwise, make sure you're talking to air traffic control. Now, if there's a situation where you find yourself inadvertently inside of a TFR, and maybe you're radio out or you're having an emergency, make sure you squawk appropriately so that de-escalates the threat level and we know that you need our assistance. Realize that we're going to try to reach out to you. So we're going to reach you on guard 121.5, and we're going to start talking to you based on your position in relationship to the TFR. Here's some gotchas, especially in backcountry like Montana, Colorado, Alaska. There's several times where you just don't have access to any type of media or a phone. So you can't get up-to-date TFR information. In that situation, try to call 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF if you can, or have someone call for you, or get that information out, or get in touch with flight service as soon as you possibly can when you're airborne. It never hurts to file a flight plan so people know what your intentions are. At this time, if you have any questions on TFRs, please ask them. Now we're going to talk about what happens when that F-16 shows up on your wing. First off, let me dispel a few rumors. As I said in the first slide, I was formerly in the Thunderbirds, where we would fly about 120 miles per hour, 150 feet off the ground. We can get pretty slow. We're also very experienced in tracking people on mopeds or walking or driving through Afghanistan and Syria. We can follow slow aircraft. So if you think that you're going to be able to get low, get slow, or land, be advised, we always have a wingman, and there's probably other agencies involved, i.e. the FBI, the Secret Service, helicopters, Customs and Border Protection. So we work as a team. And if you're trying to evade because you don't want to risk looking like you made a mistake, or you don't want to come in contact with the FAA or law enforcement, realize there's a lot of people that have been looking at you for a very long time, and now you just look like a nefarious actor, and our threat level kind of heightens. So please don't do that. Additionally, on our aircraft, we carry a targeting pod. We can read a license plate 5 miles away, 20,000 feet in the air. We can probably figure out who you are, where you're at, where you're going. Intercept procedures. If you look in the AIM 5-6-2, it tells you more about intercept procedures and what to do if you're ever intercepted by a fighter or helicopter type aircraft. If you ever enter a TFR without contacting ATC, we're going to try to reach out to you. Again, we are trying to de-escalate the situation and try to identify you, whether as a friend or a foe, whether you made a mistake, you need some help, or you mean harm. So we're going to reach out to you on guard and try to get you there. So please, if you're not talking to ATC, monitor guard. At that point, we're going to try to guide you to a safe place to land. If at any time you're not able to land at an airport, by all means, safety first, take care of yourself, take care of your airplane, and let us know that you're unable to do so, and we'll continue to escort you outside the TFR. If you see a fighter on your wing, realize that we have several different types of alert postures. Sometimes we're airborne, sometimes we're on a short ground alert, but most of the times we're within minutes of getting airborne. So if at any time a fighter shows up on your wing, you've probably wandered into an area where you shouldn't be, and at that point, we need to just get you clear. Don't do anything that's going to jeopardize your safety or the safety of the intercepting aircraft, like turning into them or diving for the ground. On the initial intercept, you're going to see an F-16, F-15, F-22, CF-18, or maybe a Coast Guard helicopter fly up along the side of you. Typically, we like to be on the left side, but we can be on either the left or the right, and we're going to rock our wings. We're telling you that we see you, do you see us? If you rock your wings back, we know that we've established that two-way communication. Realize that our flight lead or wingman is probably in a 3 to 5 mile trail behind you. So if you see that we're going to reposition, use afterburner and climb extremely steep as we reposition behind you and then keep trading off as we're doing what we call a racetrack orbit, don't try to follow us. If you can't follow us with your type of aircraft and thrust, don't try to. We're doing that on purpose just to get out of your way and then continue to guide you. Now, if you see us fly across your nose very aggressively and we're throwing out flares, you're doing something that we don't like. So we want you to essentially turn. And we're escalating force at that point. These are the 4 different aircraft that you may see intercept you: an F-16, an F-15C, an F-22, a CF-18. Now that doesn't mean you might not see an F-35 or an F-15 Strike Eagle on your wing, where we could use those depending on the situation. Now, if you're intercepted, as I said before, we're going to try to contact you on a radio frequency. So if you are listening to guard, we'll first attempt there. After that, we'll look for a local ATC frequency or maybe a local UNORTHCOM frequency. And then we're going to try to pass words to see if you have a problem. It sounds something like this. Aircraft in the vicinity of Houston International Airport at 8,000 feet, flying heading 080, squawking 1200. This is an armed air defense fighter on guard. You have been intercepted. Comply with my instructions. Turn south immediately. If you do not comply, you may be fired upon. That is the point where you can basically give us the information of why you're in a position that you're in. Maybe you're lost, maybe you have an emergency, maybe you're a student pilot trapped above the clouds, whatever that is. If you are intercepted and I fly on your left side, rock my wings, and start a gradual, slow turn to the left, I want you to follow me. That is the international sign that you've been intercepted. And I'd like you to continue to follow me. Even if you lose sight of me, realize there's a wingman behind you that's tracking you. Just continue on that last heading and last altitude that you were provided. But again, safety first. If you're going to fly into a cloud and you're not IFR rated, then try to avoid that as best you can. But remain predictable. If timing is not on our side and you're getting very close to an area that we want to keep you away from, then most likely we're going to up our aggressiveness and we're going to try to get you to turn immediately. In this situation, we call it a headbutt, where the fighter is going to fly across your nose. Most of the time we're going to be low unless visual factors require us to go high so that you don't fly through our jet wash. We're going to light the afterburner, and we may even throw out flares, which are just little balls of fire in front of your aircraft. In that case, I recommend you turn immediately and follow the aircraft in front of you. If at any time we fly up next to you and we lower our gear, that is the international signal for we need you to land immediately. So if you are a fixed gear aircraft, then just follow us through the descent and we're going to place you on final with clearance to land at the nearest airport that is safely available for you. If you are retractable gear, then go ahead and lower your gear as well and follow us on in. After the intercept, you're probably going to meet some of your new friends. The FAA, the Secret Service, they're probably going to have a lot of questions for you. Answer them truthfully. They do have a compliance mindset, so if you honestly just made a mistake, you meant no harm, most of the time they're just going to talk to you, maybe give you a little bit of education, and then have you go on your way. And then you'll have a great bar story in the future. At this time, we can talk about any intercepts that you may have heard of, or if you have any additional questions for what it's going to look like if a fighter intercepts you. Now we're going to go into a little bit of detail of Washington, D.C. and the CFRA and the freeze. Realize that the training that I'm about to give you is available online at FAA.gov, and you have to actually accomplish training and get a certificate printed if you ever want to enter within the CFRA and the freeze. The methods to do such are very detailed, and you certainly want to have a pen and paper ready as you're taking that course online. But I'll go over kind of the highlights. Realize that the Washington, D.C. CIFRA is about 30 nautical miles around the Reagan VOR, and it goes from surface to 18,000 feet. There are a few cutouts for some satellite airports around D.C., but all in large, about 30 nautical miles from Reagan VOR. If you are VFR, you have to follow a special VFR flight plan. You have to have a discrete frequency and squawk, even if you're just staying in the pattern at one of the local airports. Also, there's a speed restriction in that airspace of 230 knots. Inside the CIFRA and the freeze, the U.S. Coast Guard, in addition to the F-16s based out of Andrews, patrol that area and are constantly on alert. So if you are in the CIFRA and you violate one of the procedures, then you can expect that you may actually see a Coast Guard helicopter that has a marquee on the right side of the aircraft. In addition to having an aircraft on alert, there's also a visual warning system. It's essentially a laser light that is directionally focused. So if you're actually seeing the light, then it is pointed at you with radar and cameras. So we're tracking you, we're looking at you, and we're looking for you to respond. If you see a flash of red light, then that means you have entered the freeze and you need to turn around and exit and contact air traffic control. Many times there's frequency changes that happen within the CIFRA and the freeze, and if you miss one of those frequency changes, you can expect that you'll either be intercepted or we'll try to communicate via the visual warning system. During the day, it is a little bit difficult to see, but at night, it's extremely bright. So red, red, green, you need to exit the CIFRA immediately. At this point, I'm going to transition to other types of airspaces that you need to be familiar with. They're not specifically TFRs, but they are military operating areas, restricted areas, prohibited areas that you'll see oftentimes on a VFR sectional. A restricted airspace means that you can't fly through it unless you're given permission from air traffic control. This only will happen if the airspace is cold and typically where things come off airplanes and hit the ground, i.e. we're dropping live ordnance. Low-level routes are depicted on VFR sectionals, and typically they're surface to about 2,000 feet AGL. Be advised they're slow routes, which mean aircraft are around 250 knots. There's VR routes for very fast routes, where the aircraft are around 500 to 550 knots. And then there's IR routes where the weather minimums are less, but you can still expect about 550 knots. Most of the aircraft are about 500 feet AGL, although some will go as low as 100 feet. So if you're around that altitude, surface to 2,000 feet, and you're deciding that you want to cross a VR or an IR and SR route, you certainly might want to climb a little bit higher, talk to air traffic control or flight service, whoever coordinates that low-level route, and certainly be vigilant in your lookout. Off-the-coast warning areas are similar to restricted areas, but they're in international airspace, so we can't call them restricted areas. In warning areas, such as south in the Gulf coast, where we have fighters at Tyndall, Eglin, New Orleans, and Houston, we use these airspaces to conduct military training, and oftentimes we're supersonic. We also shoot missiles in this airspace, and these are areas that you need to avoid, or at least be talking to air traffic control to find out if they're hot or cold. If you go to Special Use Airspace, sua.tfr.gov, you can find out where all that special use airspace exists, whether it's a MOA, restricted, prohibited, or low level. This will give you more situational awareness of what's going on around you when you're flying VFR. Although all airspace is depicted on a VFR sectional, sometimes it's not hot, and you can determine whether it is by going to websites that will tell you times of operation, as well as talking to air traffic control. Sometimes that can save you quite a bit of money and fuel and time if you don't have to go around these airspaces. A great example is north of Las Vegas, where we have the Nevada Test and Training Range. That's the crown jewel of the Department of Defense, where we're able to drop bombs, go fast, and conduct a lot of training, what we call wars, if you will, like red flag, every single day. But on the weekends, a lot of times those airspaces go cold, and if you're transiting from Nevada up north or over to California, you certainly want to know if those are active or not. All right, a lot of information, and I really appreciate your attention. If you remember nothing else from this briefing, I want you to remember plan, squawk, and talk. That will keep you safe 99.9% of the time. At this time, thanks again for attending this briefing. If you have any questions or if you'd like more information, you can always go to our website, www.norad.mil. Thank you.